This story takes us to the Midwestern city of Omaha, Nebraska, a community which lies on the Missouri River not far from the Iowa border. Among other things, Omaha is famous for its zoo and the world's largest indoor desert. But indoor deserts were not a top priority for 34-year-old Dave Krupa when he moved to Omaha in 2012 to start his new job managing an auto repair shop. Dave had just recently separated from his long-term partner, Amy Flora, with whom he had 2 children, and Dave was keen to make the most of his freedom. He hopped on to some online dating sites. Dave was an easygoing, affable guy, and soon found himself with no shortage of dates. He was also upfront with the women he met. He wasn't looking for a relationship, just some no-strings-attached fun. Unfortunately, not everyone who crossed his path would turn out to be quite so easygoing or affable, but we'll get to that shortly. Our story begins on an autumn day in 2012 when a young woman named Carrie Lee Farver happened by Dave's auto repair shop. 37-year-old Carrie was a single mother to a 14-year-old boy and a successful computer programmer. She'd come by the shop to get some maintenance work done on her Ford Explorer, and as she entered, Dave found himself locking eyes with the striking brunette. Sparks flew, at least from Dave's perspective. Carrie later told a friend that Dave was totally not her type, but let's go with Dave's for now. Dave arranged for her car to be fixed, and with that done, he did the professional thing and said goodbye. Days later, though, her profile happened to pop up on his favorite dating site. Dave messaged her, and she messaged back. Once again, though, the exchange went nowhere. But this was to prove a case of third time lucky for Dave, because soon after, Carrie returned to the shop. She had a noise in her engine that needed seeing to. This time, the sparks were mutual, and when Dave asked her out for dinner, Carrie agreed. Dave wasn't the only one who found Carrie exuded a certain contagious vibe. Friends described Carrie as vivacious, independent, and smart as a whip. At school, she had been in a gifted and talented class, and had even topped that. Carrie had always been close with her mother and loved by her friends. In an interview with a local paper for her high school graduation, Carrie said she wanted to be known as always having a smile on her face and for being a little crazy. At 22, life had thrown her a curveball when she found herself pregnant and single. But Carrie was independent and strong-minded, and she quit university in order to embrace her new role of mom. Carrie was devoted to her son Max, and he was the one constant in her life over the somewhat turbulent years to come. By 37, though, Carrie had settled into a great apartment close to her mother Nancy and had found herself a well-paying job. Dave and Carrie had their first date at Applebee's. Carrie later told a friend that she hadn't laughed so much in years. Dave said that you could cut the sexual tension with a knife. There had been just one setback. Dave's ex, 38-year-old Shanna Golyar, who went by Liz, was one of the first women Dave had met online, and they had been dating on and off for the past 6 months. Liz had 2 kids similar in age to his own, but while he found Liz fun, Dave had never been all that taken with her. Besides, she changed her mind constantly about him dating other women. One minute she was fine with it, the next not, and apparently this was a night when she was not. Halfway through his date with Carrie, Dave noticed that he had missed numerous calls and messages from Liz. She'd suddenly remembered she'd left something important at Dave's and needed him to let her into his apartment immediately. Dave told her she'd have to wait. With that taken care of, he invited Carrie back to his apartment for a nightcap, but the pair hadn't even taken off their coats when the doorbell rang. It was Liz. Dave was furious, but Carrie took it in stride, suggesting he'd come to her house after he'd sorted things out with Liz. Dave watched as the 2 women passed each other at the door. It was was a 10-second encounter, but one that would change the course of all of their lives forever. Dave made the hour-long journey to Carrie's place in Macedonia, Iowa later that night. And when Carrie told Dave that she wasn't looking for anything serious, Dave felt he had hit the jackpot. Things between Dave and Carrie moved fast for two people not looking for commitment. Over the next 2 weeks, they met almost every day. The pair had an amazing chemistry, and it was just easy, Dave said. It so happened that Carrie's work was also just 3 blocks from Dave's place. She was in the middle of a major project and was working long hours and stayed several nights to avoid the commute. On the morning of November 13th, Dave woke early to find Carrie already up and putting the final touches on the project she had been presenting that day. At 6:30 a.m., he gave her a kiss goodbye and told her that he would see her that evening. At mid-morning that day, Dave was juggling multiple clients when he received a message from Carrie. She wanted to know if he'd move in with her. Dave was taken aback. Carrie had made it clear that she wanted to keep things casual. What was with this sudden turnaround? He wrote a quick message back saying that was not going to happen. Carrie's retaliation was swift and dramatic. "Fine, you," she wrote. "I hate you. I don't want to see you again. I'm dating someone else." Dave was blown away. Just that morning, he had kissed goodbye a loving and independent woman, only to find himself fielding hysterical threats just 4 hours later. Dave hit back. "Fine, goodbye." At lunchtime, he stopped by his apartment. All was in order and empty. As quickly as their affair had begun, it had ended. Or so he thought. Because, as you probably have guessed already, this was never going to be a case of happily ever after. Several days of radio silence passed, during which Dave began to feel like he had just dodged a serious bullet with Carrie. But then the messaging began. "I hate you. You ruined my life. You're a terrible person." Message after message from Carrie blew up his phone. They were overflowing with expletives. If hate and rage had a language of their own, Carrie was using it to write these mad rants. And then police showed up at Dave's work. The officers told Dave that nobody had laid eyes on Carrie Farver since the morning Dave had kissed her goodbye several days ago. Carrie's mother had received a message on the morning of November 13th saying she had split with Dave and was checking herself into a mental institution. Carrie's employer had received a message saying that she was resigning and taking a new position in Kansas. Carrie's son Max had received a similar message. She'd promised Max that she'd be back to collect him in time for her half-brother's wedding, but the wedding had come and gone. Her mother filed a missing persons report. According to police, Dave was the last known person to have seen Carrie. Feeling like a deer in the headlights, Dave allowed the police to search his car and download the contents of his phone. He explained that he'd only dated Carrie for 2 weeks, and the last time she had been sitting on his couch with her laptop. And then the messages started. These crazy, off-the-wall, hate-filled messages, and she had been bombarding him with those ever since. Police believed Dave's account, and then shared with him some information that would change his perspective on the whole situation. Carrie, the police said, had been diagnosed with bipolar disorder in her late 20s. She'd been known at times to not take her medication. The implication was that, clearly, she had gone off the boil after a spell of not taking her meds, but she had likely bounced back. Dave was relieved and sorry for Carrie. He agreed to let police know if he discovered anything about her whereabouts. But that sympathy was soon to run dry. In the weeks following the police visit, Dave was receiving upwards of 60 messages a day. He could also add to that hundreds of emails. They came from an ever-growing assortment of different numbers and email addresses. Every person Dave had ever known soon received messages saying that Dave was a liar and a cheat. One woman he'd met on a dating site was told that her kids would be killed if she contacted him again. Even random women on Plenty of Fish, the dating site, received heads up that Dave Krupa was a scumbag and a liar. Dave would wake up to abusive messages from women he didn't even know. As for Liz Golyar, Carrie blamed the end of their relationship on her. Liz was furious and terrified. Carrie had been bombarding her with threats, she said. What had she ever done to this woman? They'd only ever seen each other once. Dave felt mortified and responsible. After all, he was the one who'd brought this woman into Liz's life. 3 weeks after Carrie apparently went off the deep end, the police approached Dave once more, but they weren't interested in the harassment. Carrie was filed as a missing person, and they only wanted to locate her. Then, in January of 2013, Dave came home to see Carrie's Ford Explorer in the parking lot near his apartment block. It felt like a breakthrough. Police examined the car and found a fingerprint on a container. They ran it through the FBI's national database. No matches came up, and the truck was returned to Carrie's bereft mother. When police interest in the case waned, the harassment was about to shift from online to outright stalking and terrorizing. Carrie was watching them, and she wanted them to know. Images were sent to Dave and Liz of their homes, often with their kids in the windows. Carrie would comment on what they were doing in real time. Dave and Liz reconnected over their shared stress and turmoil. Carrie was not happy. Dave returned home from work one day to find a window smashed in. His couch was cut up, his TV keyed, and "Liz is a whore" written in red lipstick on his wall. The clothes Liz had left on his bed had been cut with a knife. When they were together, Dave's phone would often ping, "I see you with Liz again." The messages became more chilling. "My favorite thing to do is stand outside your window and stare at you. I see you sitting in your chair with your feet propped up, wearing a blue shirt." Every panel on both cars were keyed. Dave's was keyed with "Dave loves fat whores" in giant letters. On one occasion, Liz's garage was broken into and spray painted with "whore." Both Dave and Liz filed harassment and stalking charges with the police, but they got nothing more than a passing nod. Twice, Dave had spoken to the special unit in the Omaha Police that deals with stalking and harassment, but they had one guy, and he was dealing with 94 cases. And things were about to get even worse. The messages became more threatening. "I hate you so much, I want to drive a knife through your heart." Another was a fake obituary for Liz. "I didn't know her very well, except that she was a man-stealer. Thank God she's gone." At some point, Dave wondered if he'd become numb to it. One day, he received a picture of someone that looked like Liz tied up in the trunk of a car. The message told him to call her now or she'd be killed. He called Liz. She was at home in bed. All of it drove Dave and Liz closer together. They used humor as a tension release, calling their stalker Crazy Carrie. But issues over commitment kept bubbling up. Every few months they'd split, then reunite. In August of 2013, things finally blew up. This time, Dave felt for good. Then, days later, he received a call that Liz's house was on fire. The house was salvaged, but Liz and her children had temporarily lost their home, many of their belongings, and by far the worst, their 2 dogs, cat, and a snake had all perished in the fire. This is Liz talking to the officer at the scene.
I've since reported some pretty obvious snakes that showed set fire.
The guy that I'm seeing, he has a girlfriend who dated for 2 weeks, and she's been stalking me since November.
Do you know her name?
It's Karen. She has made threats towards me and my kids. She would kept texting me telling me she wanted to kill me and my kids. You would think they were married as much as she's stalking me. She won't leave me alone. She's not go away. I just wish she would go away.
2 months later, Dave's auto shop was spray painted in orange, Dave Beats Women. In January of 2014, an old girlfriend of Dave's from Sioux Falls came to spend the night. A few hours after they'd gone to bed, there was a sound like a gunshot. Someone had thrown a brick through their bathroom window. By now, the strain was getting to Dave. His job was in trouble. The lives of his friends and family had been upset. He was a nervous wreck. This time, he took drastic measures. He moved, got a new job, changed all of his contact details, and bought a gun. For a while, he stayed under the radar. Then, in a moment of weakness, he took a peek at a dating site. He got to chatting with an attractive woman and arranged to meet her for dinner. The woman never showed. Instead, he received a message from Carrie. Surprise, it said. Now Carrie had his new number and new location. By now, it was late 2015. And then came a switch that no one saw coming. Liz had received an email, an angry email, from Amy Flora. It had gotten her thinking. Could their stalker, in fact, be Amy? Had Amy been impersonating Carrie all along? In December 2015, Liz walked into the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office to file a harassment report against Amy Flora, Dave's ex and the mother of his children. Liz said that she had come to suspect that Amy had stolen the identity of Carrie and was responsible for their stalking over the past 3 years. Carrie had only dated Dave for 2 weeks. Amy had much more reason to be possessive of Dave. And just recently, Dave's gun had gone missing. Dave had noticed the gun was missing and reported it to police the day prior. Police asked if they could once again do a download of Liz's phone. She agreed. Soon afterwards, Dave was called in by the police. He was thrilled. Finally, it seemed police were going to take the stalking seriously. Only this was an interrogation over Carrie's disappearance. Detectives Ryan Avis and Jim Doughty had worked at the Pottawatomie County Sheriff's Office in Council Bluffs. They had always found the cold case of Carrie Farver intriguing. It made no sense that a woman like Carrie would just up and go, leaving her bank accounts untouched and refusing to let anyone hear her voice. Bipolar was a common enough disorder and could hardly be used as a justification for her bizarre behavior. They'd asked their superiors if they could take a fresh look at the case. It didn't take long before they latched onto the theory that she might not be alive. But who was impersonating her? And what had happened to Carrie Farver on that early morning of November 13th, 2012? If anyone had any information to share, it was Dave. Dave laid everything on the table. He had nothing to hide, after all. By the time he was done talking, police seemed convinced, once again, that he had nothing to do with Carrie's disappearance. But what happened next stunned everyone. On December 5th, 2015, a 911 call came through to police from Big Lake Park in Council Bluffs, Iowa. It was Liz Golyar. She had been walking alone on a trail in the dark when she had been approached by a woman from behind. The woman had said, "How do you like Dave?" before shooting her in the leg. Liz was rushed to the hospital by ambulance. While there with police, memories rushed back. She said it was Amy Flora who had shot her, the nutty ex of Dave Cooper. When police burst into Amy's house, they found her in her PJs with her 1-year-old on her lap. Her car was outside and cold to the touch. She had been there all night. The Carrie Farver case had now been changed from a missing persons investigation to a homicide investigation. The detectives brought in Tony Carver, a digital forensic expert, to track the source of the messages. Carrie, or her imposter, had sent around 15,000 messages over a 3-year period. Over the next months, Carver would dedicate thousands of hours of his time, voluntarily, to trace the source of those messages. Every digital trail led back to the same place and the same person. The detectives approached Carrie's mother, Nancy. For years, she had been ignored by police. But from those earliest messages, Nancy, Carrie's friends, and her son Max had all suspected they were dealing with an imposter. The messages were full of grammatical errors. Carrie refused to answer questions that would prove that it was Carrie, and the woman they knew would never abandon her son. Life had passed in a state of suspended anguish. Scenarios played over and over in Nancy's mind each day and night, each worse than the one before. Once, Nancy had received a call from a man at a homeless shelter who said he had Carrie there with him. Hardly daring to hope, Nancy drove miles with police only to find that no one by the name of Carrie was there. Nancy now showed police an image of a check she had been sent after Carrie's disappearance. The person masquerading as Carrie had sold all of her furniture online and now asked Nancy to let the buyer into the house to pick it up. The check had been made out to Carrie, but it was from someone police had long suspected. The check had been signed by Shanna Golyar. Nothing could have prepared Dave for the sucker punch of learning the identity of his stalker. It was like running into a brick wall in a racing car, he said. Like, how could I be so naive, or so stupid, or so gullible? Everything I thought I knew was a lie. And still, it was impossible to process. Liz had burned her children's home down, killed her own animals and destroyed her own belongings, keyed her own car, vandalized her own garage, shot herself in the leg, terrorized Dave and his family while pretending to console him, all to bring Dave back into her life. The real question was, had she killed Carrie? Police suspected that she had, but they didn't have enough evidence to charge her. In the meantime, she had something even worse in store for Dave. Police now told Dave that Liz was on the verge of becoming totally unhinged. They put a tracker on her car, and she had been repeatedly going to the same block of apartments every day, all the time. It was the complex of Amy Flora and his children. Police felt they were in imminent danger and urged Dave to move in with Amy to act as a protector. In fact, they had altogether other reasons for wanting Dave there, but Dave was more than happy to oblige anyway. 2 weeks after the shooting, police brought Liz in for an interview. They asked if she knew of anyone who would want Carrie dead. Liz didn't even pause for a breath. Amy Flora, she said. Police told Liz they needed to start building a case and wanted her help extracting a confession from her. Liz's genuine lack of intellect now revealed itself. Within days, she had produced emails from Amy confessing to shooting Liz at the Big Lake Park. Police pushed Liz to get more details from Amy on Carrie's final moments. A few days later, Amy had miraculously produced the goods. She'd also now completely dropped any pretense at being Carrie, and therefore any cover whatsoever. Amy's message read, "When I met Crazy Carrie, she would not stop talking about Dave and him being her husband. She tried to attack me, but I attacked her with a knife. I stabbed her 3 or 4 times in the chest and stomach area, and then took her out and burned her. I stuffed her body in a garbage can." The details were graphic and horrifying. Detectives decided to push Liz even further. They told her that Dave had moved back in with Amy. Liz was hysterical. She wanted to know why Amy hadn't been arrested yet. Wasn't the email enough? Police told her they needed more. Something only the killer would know. Another confession from Amy now miraculously appeared. It read, "I really did kill Carrie, and I did it in her own car." Police now had a crime scene. The crime scene that had been sold by Carrie's mother years ago, but which, incredibly, police managed to track down. This time, they removed the passenger seat fabric. Beneath it was a large red stain that tested positive for human blood. The DNA matched Carrie's. Police arrested Liz on a traffic warrant and brought her in. They now presented her with the mountain of evidence they had been accumulating for months. The fingerprint was a match for the fingerprint left in Carrie's car. They found Carrie's digital camera and camcorder in Liz's house, taken from Carrie's in the days after her disappearance. From the downloads of Liz's phone, they discovered that Liz had made 6 calls to Carrie's residence before Carrie had disappeared, and retrieved an image Liz had taken with her own cell phone. A selfie of herself tied up with duct tape over her mouth in a car trunk. Every impersonated message connected back to a device of hers or to the IP address at her house. She had used an app that allowed her to create messages and schedule them to be sent at a later time, giving her the perfect alibi. Then there was a tablet that Dave had in storage. The SD card in it had once been in Liz's phone and contained thousands of deleted images. Most were selfies of Liz, but there was another image too. At first, detectives had not known exactly what they were looking at. Skin, reddish in tone, visible tattoos. It was a human foot in the early stages of decomposition. Carrie's foot. Police were able to identify Carrie from her distinctive tattoos. The Chinese tattoo was a symbol for mother, the role she had loved so much and had been stolen from her, just as she had been stolen from her son and from her mother. It was the single most powerful evidence to emerge from the investigation. Police estimated that Liz must have spent 40 to 50 hours a week on the full-time occupation of terrorizing and stalking Dave, herself, and everyone who knew him. Liz denied it all. She told police she'd never been in Carrie's car, never written any emails. She didn't even have internet at her house. Mad or bad or both. Douglas County prosecutor Brenda Beadle later said that it was the most difficult case she had ever tried. This one was bizarre to the point where it would take some convincing to make someone believe that it actually happened. Liz Golyar was an aberration even within the criminal world. Most heartbreaking of all, the false hope she had given to Carrie's mother and son. In one message sent from Max to Carrie's imposter 3 years after she had disappeared, he had written, "If this is really you, please come back. I want you to be at my graduation." On August 15, 2017, Liz Golyar was found guilty of first-degree murder and sentenced to life in prison.
And I'm so thankful that she can't hurt anybody else. She's terrorized too many people.
Now to a different story tonight. It's a bizarre murder case that has gained national attention. A twisted plot line that took investigators years to unravel. A mother went missing about 5 years ago in Omaha. Her body was found. The woman who killed her then assumed her identity. Today, she learned her fate.
Some people are capable of
Shanna Golyar is sentenced to life in prison plus 18 to 20 years by Judge Judy Burns for first-degree murder and arson. Judge Burns convicted her with proof beyond a reasonable doubt of stabbing Carrie Farver to death in 2012 outside her boyfriend's Omaha apartment. Golyar previously dated the same man. There were many hugs for Carrie's family afterwards. Her mother says she's glad Golyar can't hurt anyone else.
She's got a life sentence now, but she also gave everybody else that loved Carrie a life sentence. She took Carrie's life. She gave my grandson a life sentence of not having his mother there. And all of the people that love her, we have to live with the nightmare that we have lived with for so long.
Golyar not only killed Farver, but for years deceived Carrie's family into thinking she was alive by sending texts she hadn't been seen since 2012. She also sent thousands of texts and emails to the former boyfriend on behalf of Farver, acting like Carrie was stalking both of them. Golyar wrote a letter to the judge asking him to find it in his heart to give her 30 years so she could get out in 15. Prosecutors say she has no heart and shows zero remorse.
She was making up excuses for what she did, trying to implicate friends of hers that helped her write the emails. There were no friends. She doesn't have many friends that ever came out in this investigation, and certainly she could have mentioned names if she wanted to during the whole trial, and she didn't.
Last Sunday, Farver's family had a memorial for Carrie by setting off lanterns. Farver wanted to be cremated and have her ashes thrown into the wind. Randy wishes they could fulfill the request.
And if that wasn't disturbing enough, there's a parting tidbit for you. Golyar has since repeatedly written of her desire to be released from prison because the real killer is still out there. I will not stop fighting until I'm set free and they find the right person.